Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Agents of Mace. Today we're continuing our watch through of the X-Men 97 series, and we're sorry that we didn't have this episode up last week, but it's just too important for us to not have everyone here together to talk about, because boy oh boy, episode 5 hits real hard. There's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of fun Easter eggs. There's a lot of intense emotional moments. I don't know the last time I watched an animated something that made me feel sad. If that makes any sense, I guess. Not, not like my go-to is like Brave Little Toaster. That's probably like has fought like I won't even watch Brave Little Toaster again because that scene with the blanket on the top of the tree has traumatized me for life, but that's like my ultimate emotional response. And this episode is like halfway there for me, at least, which is a lot because boy, oh boy, that's quite the emotional response for that poor blanket. So I think we'll start with first thoughts.
Man, that's a way to jump into this call. Oh my goodness. Well, I guess, when it comes to this episode, it definitely hits emotions at the end. Yeah, episode 5, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this was like the episode that broke the internet. Because we've talked about this a bit online, but like one of the biggest struggles we've had with a lot of these series and stuff is just the over amount of spoilers and just feedback, and this one was definitely one of them because it was hard to be online because I'm pretty sure you would see like X-Men 97 along with very specific characters trending for like a multiple day period. And then, I was a little bit behind on watching this episode, so I had to like hold back on like what I would try to look at and stuff. But like once I watched this episode, I definitely understood the hype around it. I've watched this one 3 times, and I know we've mentioned this a lot, but man, there are things in this episode that I would give anything if they could have like expanded it out to like a full season. And I think a lot of it is just the fact that like they're going to Genosha for all this stuff. And the thing with like X-Men, it's you get into these political sides of things, right? It's always been around like humans versus mutants, and but then even within the mutants, you've got Magneto versus Xavier, and kind of like what they're standing for. And then humans are just generally scared of mutants and don't know how to like police everything. And now you're going into this world where like you have all these mutants, living in this one area, but the setup, it almost had like this House of Cards-esque setup to it in a way. Very like kind of political, right? Like, of why Magneto's there and what they're asking of Magneto and all of that. I was just like, please make this an entire season. Like, I would be all for this. Just more of like kind of a different side of what we normally would see within mutants, right? It usually ends up of like, here's all these bad mutants, and the good guys are going to go fight the bad guys, and then a lot of times the bad guys are kind of layered in with like the humans government, right, and what they're going for. But now we're getting more fine-tuned into like a mutant government, which I found really fascinating. But all in all, solid episode. The ending, oh my goodness, there's a lot that happens. And as we talk about it, I think it will clearly make sense of like why this could have been stretched out. I mean, it's just like it starts off so slow and you're getting some really fascinating storylines. And then when you get to the ending, it's just like boom. It's like, man, you took like 9 episodes and crammed it into like 20 minutes, and then like the finales that last 10 minutes. But yeah, it's a major episode and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, definitely. How about you, Elisa?
Well, first of all, watching this episode did get me into a small amount of trouble because I've been watching the show with my husband, and I was initially being very good and not watching anything until we were going to cover it. But then when I was still a few episodes behind, like I'm not even on Twitter anymore. I'm not on the Twitter, so I don't see spoilers the way that I used to. They were like people were freaking out about this episode on Facebook. You know, something is big whenever people are freaking out about it on Facebook. And so I was like, well, now I got to know. And so I burned through all the episodes I was behind and I watched this one. And even going into this fully expecting big things to happen, I was still so shocked at the end. I think part of it is the way that the episode is structured. It does kind of seem like we're spending a lot of time with all these different storylines that they get to breathe, and then everything happened so suddenly.
Hmm.
Like I think it was very, very smartly done. But yeah, they covered a lot of ground in this one, and the rest of the season is definitely going to be what are the after effects, what are the ramifications of what happened here. Um, and so yeah, we've got a lot to cover.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, there's no other way to say it. We just gotta dive right in at the beginning because not only is there so much to cover, but it's such like a vast collection of stories all happening at once. And to your point, Luke, like, yeah, this could have been the entire season. I mean, there's enough stuff going on here that they could have stretched this out, and this could have been season one of this show. Um, to start, we are at the school. Genosha is officially being recognized by the UN. Cool. Mutants have like their own place that they can go and, in theory, live peacefully. Um, I the beginning of this episode feels like it starts kind of slow,
Hmm.
but then like I don't know how to explain it. It's like it starts slow and immediately starts to pick up speed. It's not like a gradually it picks up speed throughout the episode. It's like it starts slow. As soon as they get to Geonosia, things are happening. Not like huge fights, but like you're like,
Just
okay, they get to Geonosia, and pretty much right away you find out that they're talking about having Magneto be in charge of Geonosia. And it's like,
yeah,
oh, okay. Well, that's weird because now he's in charge of the X-Men. So
right.
it's also a little confusing to me. Basically, they go on like a diplomatic trip, right? It's just like him. He invites Rogue to go with him. Gambit's like, whoa, whoa, I'm coming too. And everyone else is like, cool, see you guys later. Weird, like, I don't know. There's not that many of them. Why don't they just all go together? Especially since it seems like everyone in Genosha likes the X-Men. So it's not like they would go and have like a negative reaction. So I don't know. It's weird that they don't all go.
Hmm.
They are having that interview with the ladies, so maybe they're like, we'll have to stay here and do this interview about how great mutants are. Beast is laying on the charm. Sunspot is
Hmm.
in it for some reason, even though like he's been like, no, nobody can know I'm a mutant, but he is on video that's probably going to be nationally broadcast, chilling with mutants.
Yeah.
So they're just like, we got stuff here. Y'all go have fun.
Well, Genosha's pretty cool. It seems a little bit like they took Wakanda and the city from Ragnarok, like the Grandmaster's city.
Hmm.
It's like
Yeah,
they took those two things and mashed them together,
mash them
and
together.
that's what we got.
Right.
Um, there's a giant statue. It's weird to me that the two statues, it's a statue of Magneto and a statue of Charles. Why did they make the statue of Charles in his hover wheelchair? Like just make him stand too. I don't know.
Yeah.
That seems weird that they I don't know. Uh
It's like a budget thing for design. Like,
Yeah, but that
yeah,
just
man.
seems like so much
It seems
more
weird.
material is being used. But
Yeah,
again, you
but
know,
and then it's like, is that more comic accurate? I don't
maybe
know.
I don't remember there
I'd
being
have to go try to
statues
find
in
some
Genosha.
episodes.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, I totally get what you're saying. Yeah, because like, well, I think the one complaint I had with this episode was the beginning. When you're with Scott and Jean, and then there's this whole like Madeline Pryor thing, but the whole conversation they have there felt weird to me
Mhm.
because I thought like the whole prior episodes, it was like Madeline Pryor was this evil character, and but now it's like nothing like that at all. It just felt off to me. It just felt like you go to one thing and then you go to this other side of things.
Well, it's also weird that Madeline Pryor and her freak out was like
Hmm.
an episode and a half, 2 episodes ago, I guess, technically, because last
Yeah,
week's was the weird Jubilee episode.
the Jubilee one, yeah.
And somehow she has somehow she has left the school and now she's on like the board of directors of Genosha. And it's like, how did she get here? And why is she immediately they're just like, well, she looks like Jean, so she's probably
It's
good. And it's like, but she wasn't good 20
right.
minutes ago.
She has Jean's memories and she has Jean's powers. So it's kind of like, did y'all ever watch? I mean, I'm sure you didn't. Did you ever watch the show Drop Dead Diva?
No.
No.
Okay, so premise is this girl dies and she's like 23, she's a model, she doesn't know anything, but she escapes heaven and winds up in the body of a plus-sized brilliant lawyer. But once she's in this body, she's suddenly really smart and knows everything about the law. And so she has like instant respect and is super successful. And so maybe it's that kind of thing. They're like, well, you're just like as good as Jean. They have one to spare.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, from the like newer comics that I've been reading, when there are like I don't know, it's like they go in the past and bring the younger versions of themselves into the future, and that's pretty much how they treat it. They're just like, well, there's two of us, so
Bonus.
yeah.
Yeah.
So like maybe, but it's just like, man, she was evil 2 episodes
Yeah.
ago, and now
Yeah.
she's like,
She was, but she turned evil within like 5 minutes and she was unevil within like 30. So it's a
yeah.
very short period of
It's
time being evil. It's easily forgiven. Easily forgiven.
mm,
Just resulted in like ruining Cable's life is all.
Yeah,
pretty
and
much. Pretty
and
much.
we'll get into it, but isn't this this is the episode where she and Scott basically have like a mind affair.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
exactly.
gross.
So she's not really not evil. She's just, I don't know, that we'll get
Except
Again,
into
that's
it.
this
kind of her man. That's
it's
kind of her man.
I mean, yeah, they have a child together, right?
Which
yeah.
one's
Whereas
the affair?
regular Gene does not, which does come up. Um,
Hmm.
but it is just like, oh, it's weird. It's
It
it's a weird
is
story to keep
it
track
is unsavory.
of. Well,
It's like it's too many stories. There's too much going on.
it's
Should have
like the last episode, right? It's like,
Yeah,
here's the story we want to hear,
right.
but they're also going to pull us away from that every now and then to tell us this other
Yeah.
story that like I don't know that I care about.
It, at least in this episode, it's like the first few minutes, and then we're out in Genosha
Yeah,
the rest of
yeah.
the episode.
Well, speaking of Genosha, lots of cool little Easter eggs here. We see some of the New Mutants, um, including Glob, who I've talked about on this podcast before, who's just a guy. It's like a skeleton and eyeballs inside essentially some sort of like bio wax is what his
Mhm.
body is made out of. So I was like, oh, cool, Glob. Um, and then Pixie and a couple of the other like new X-Men. So that was fun to see. I'm wondering if like they'll be a bigger part moving forward in the show, or if it was just sort of like a nod to the fact that like they exist in this world. We're just not ready for them yet. Um, we also get to see Kurt. He shows back up, get a little Nightcrawler action. So that's exciting. Dazzler. Well, it's not really Dazzler. It's clone Jean Madeline Pryor making Dazzler's power, which is confusing.
Yeah.
But and then we see the oh, what are they called? Magneto's like group of mutants as well.
Morlocks?
Yeah, the
Is that what they are?
Morlocks. Yeah.
Mhm.
So we see them. They're hanging out here too. So it kind of seems like, oh, this is neat. There's, everybody's here. Everybody's happy. Maybe this is a good thing. Um,
Except Gambit. Gambit doesn't think it's good.
yeah, Gambit's not super keen on what's going on. He's also a little upset that Rogue is like 100% clearly
Into
still in love with Magneto.
that's like the only reason he's there.
Yeah, and then that whole story seems icky too, because like they show sort of like how it happened. They were just like, yeah, she was a teenager who didn't know how to control her powers and lived in the Savage Land, and then Magneto found her and taught her how to use her powers, and then they fell in love. But the whole time I'm like, but you just said that you were a teenager when this happened, and he already has white hair.
Yeah.
Like, I
I
I
mean,
get,
it's understandable from Rogue's side because, like, when you're young like that, you can totally be dazzled by an older man. Yeah, absolutely. That does not excuse Magneto.
yeah, it's
That's
icky.
not an excuse.
It's icky
Unless
on
there's
his
like,
side.
unless she is older than she led us to believe and older than it looks like she was. But yeah, she didn't do anything wrong. She just found somebody that was saying cool stuff that she was hanging out with all the time and helped her to do some more cool stuff. But yeah, I don't know how to feel about this whole situation because it seems like there's still something there, but then it started weird and yeah, it's so
Yeah,
messed up.
it's just like, man, I get what you're trying to do, but you can't hit us immediately with their ages, or at least her age, and then make it seem like that's totally fine in the context of what's going on. It's like, oh no. Like we're at this point we're supposed to be rooting for Magneto. Now you're making it back to like, oh, Magneto.
Yeah, he might have been into somebody who was still technically like 18 years old.
Yeah.
But Gambit here, he has a conversation with Kurt that I thought was so sweet. And it's important to talk about because it kind of sets up things that happens later. Because Kurt just tells Gambit, like, go marry her. Like, get over it. Like, go make this happen. And Gambit says that he's too much of a scoundrel for love. And Kurt says that love is all about forgiveness. And so he's like telling him, like, still go for it. Don't get down on yourself just because you've been a little bit naughty in the past. So yeah, I'm siding with Gambit here.
Yeah,
For
go
many
Gambit.
reasons.
Go Gambit. Speaking of siding with people in two-sided relationships, so we go back to the school, and while the interview is going on, surprise, surprise, Wolverine doesn't want to be a part of the interview. So he goes and chit-chats with Jean, and they end up kissing. And he's like, hey, you should probably go talk to Scott.
Yeah.
If Wolverine is the one making sense, you have made a poor decision.
Yeah, you really messed up if he's the one that's like, nah, you should probably not do this.
Yeah. Well, it's sticking on the whole subject of like this. Like, you remember when they get into Genosha and like all the people there are welcoming them. There's people holding up signs that says Magneto is right.
Yeah.
So I mean, this whole episode seems to be tied into that kind of stuff.
Yeah. There's definitely like the morality of what X-Men is trying to show us is prevalent in this series, which is nice to see because I feel like in some of the other ones, it's not so much that. It's more about like, how can we get them to fight and show them fighting? Whereas this does seem to dig a lot more into like what X-Men is about. Um, so
Yeah.
that it's cool, and I'm interested to see where it goes, especially because they keep adding more and more people, which is what I've wanted all along. Um, so like we find out who's in charge, semi in charge of Genosha right now, Emma Frost. Crazy pull. She's here. She's a little sneaky. Like you don't 100% trust her. Which is kind of her bit, right? Like she's a villain sometimes, she's good other times. Um, so I'm wondering, like, should we trust her right now, or is she here to like sow the seeds of chaos? We don't know yet. Also, they haven't like they kind of dig into the fact that she has telepathic powers, but they don't at all talk about her like diamond skin powers.
Yeah.
So I don't know if this is like the Emma Frost. I'm assuming it's the Emma Frost from the comics.
Yeah.
Um, because that's how everyone else is so far. But I don't know,
Right.
maybe they've like adjusted her a little bit for this.
It's possible.
Well, we know from the next episode. Or maybe
Yeah.
it's the one after the next one. I can't remember. We know from one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we also get
Um,
two other people in this room that are all together. Sebastian Shaw is there.
yeah, I was going to list off the full council
Oh yeah, go for
members.
it. Go for it.
Yeah, so it was Sebastian Shaw, Emma Frost, Banshee, Madeline Pryor, Callisto, and Moira McTaggart.
Yeah, and it's like this is the more I was talking about when we started this series, where it's like, yeah, she is like Scottish Moira McTaggart. Like when you think about her, if you didn't watch the old show, you think about Moira McTaggart, you think about the like X-Men First Class movies, where she's like CIA American, and here we are, she's like straight out of Scotland, the thickest accent possible. So that's fun to have her here, and she's human, right? So it's
Yeah.
like, oh, you got a human here. Um,
Which,
everyone else seems
see,
fine, but Sebastian seems like well, why is he on this group of people? Isn't he a bad guy?
yeah,
Seems a little questionable. Uh,
it's like, it's almost like this is, so if you're familiar with the John Wick movies, it's like the common ground, right?
mhm,
It's like if you're in Genosha, it doesn't matter if you're good, which side you're on,
mhm.
you can't do anything.
Yeah, I mean, and
And I think
that's
for the political side of things, it'll make things interesting. But this goes back to what I said at the beginning: make this a full season, more conversations where you have, you know, good guys and bad guys trying to figure stuff out together.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I think it's cool because like you're seeing, I mean, part of Magneto's whole story, right, is that like it's not so much that he's a bad guy, it's that
Hmm.
he sees this problem where humans want to exterminate mutants, and
Yeah,
instead of trying to work with humans, he wants to fight humans.
yeah,
And Charles wants to work with humans. So it's not so much
exactly.
that
Yeah,
he's a bad guy, it's just two different ways of
yeah,
handling this problem. So,
100%. Yeah. Rewatch. So, side note, rewatch all the Planet of the Apes movies because the new one's coming out.
mhm,
And I gotta say, like, Dawn is probably my favorite, and it's because of that. The whole movie is about Caesar versus Koba because they both
mhm,
view humans in a different way, and one wants to work with them, the other one wants to fight them,
mhm.
and so
Yeah.
we basically have Magneto and Xavier.
Yeah, it's not so much like good versus bad as it is like
Yeah,
violence versus peace, but
it's just how they're viewing the world. It's just they
mhm,
have to agree to disagree.
right. Well, agreeing to disagree, uh Magneto approaches Rogue and is basically like, I'm gonna be in charge of Genosha, and I want you to be my queen.
Yeah.
And she's like, deal. I mean, I don't even know that she thinks about it. She's pretty much like on board from the second that he says it. Then she
Mm-hmm.
has like a quick conversation with Gambit where it's like, oh, do I want to do this? Yes, I want to do this. Sorry, Gambit. You don't understand. And then that's when we get the like flashback of how she and
Mm-hmm.
Magneto got together in the first place. But
Mhm.
you feel bad. I mean, Gambit didn't do anything wrong in this situation. If anything, it's just like Rogue still having feelings for Magneto and kind of claiming that it's because she can touch him.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But
That's just twisting the knife with Gambit.
mhm. So that's
It's it's like that's definitely a part of it. I could also see it being like some sort of power move, you know?
mhm.
Um, yeah, again, I wanted more here. Like really going deep into these kind of decisions and like where these characters' minds are out of like what are they truly going for in this
Mhm.
particular case, you know? But yeah.
Yeah, and then they have like the whole so they're going to like a ball or a gala or
Hmm.
something. And Rogue shows up and she goes and she like dances with Magneto. And they like float around the room and stuff.
Mhm.
I will say right before they do this, when we're outside and the fireworks are going off, you can see the Watcher in the
You can
sky.
see the Watcher, yeah.
Mason pointed that out when we were watching this. He's like, "Is that the
Yeah.
Watcher?"
So that's kind of
So
exciting.
going back, that's like one of the first things that was spoiled for me. Everyone's like, everyone pause it at this specific mark and tell me I'm not losing my mind. Like, so sure enough, like the second time I watched the episode, I paused it there just to triple check, you know, and I was like, sure enough, like there's
Oh,
the
there
Watcher.
he is, checking it out.
Yeah.
Um, well, they dance, they kiss. She realizes in the moment that like, oh, she actually loves Gambit. And it's sort of like, man, but you couldn't have figured this out yet. You had to go through all this and put Gambit through all this stuff. So she's gonna go, you know, talk to Gambit. But before she can, guess who pops up from the future? It's Cable
Mm-hmm.
in his comic book glory. And he like runs over and is basically like telling everyone they need to leave and they need to evacuate. Um, he sees Madeline, who is technically his mother,
Mm-hmm.
and is just like, sorry, mom. And then the way that his teleporting works, like going back in time and stuff, is like he only has a limited amount of time before he
Right.
gets like pulled back to the future, sort of like a yo-yo. So he's able to say sorry, mom, before he gets his time slide gets sends him back to the future. Um, and then that's when the episode explodes, like both literally and metaphorically. They're attacked by a giant sentinel with three heads that like shoot giant green beams of light.
Scary.
Um, yeah, and it's like, I mean, the this show is definitely leaning a little more mature when it comes to some of the stuff going on.
Mm-hmm.
And in this episode, immediately I was like, wow, I wonder if they're going to talk about like a death toll after this attack because it's just like vaporizing people. Like
Mm-hmm.
every time the green light hits people, they turn into like skeletons and then dust. Um, we see almost immediately Nightcrawler saving Rogue and Magneto. He gets injured, uh, which like, man, the one person you would think wouldn't have gotten caught. Um, the fight just like expands throughout the city because we learn that not only is this giant sentinel super powerful, but also it just like launches regular sentinels all over the place. So like people are fighting all over. Um, we do get to see like a couple other like Easter eggy mutants show up and do stuff,
Mhm.
which is like kind of cool, but it does seem a lot more like they were thrown in here just to be like, look, remember this guy? And it's like, okay. um, Magneto gets super mad, and this is the second time that we've heard someone referenced as an Omega level threat. Um, and he like we've used the Dragon Ball Z references before. He basically goes like Magneto Super Saiyan and flies around with his little like magnet ball
Mhm.
around him.
Yeah.
Um, the Morlocks potentially wiped out. They're all like hiding together, and the Sentinel thing shows up and blows up their hiding spot. Um, I feel like during the fight, it seems like Rogue isn't doing much. In the comics, she's like super powerful. It feels like she's not doing a whole lot, especially when I think I talked about this in episode 1. I really like when we get to see the X-Men, especially, use their powers together, right? Like even in some of the old games, your Cyclops, you could shoot your laser at Wolverine, and he could use his claws to deflect it and spread it out, and it hits like 5 people instead of one. It's really cool to me. It makes sense because they train together. You'd think that they would be able to do more. So for this whole fight, I was like, why isn't Rogue just flying around and like tapping people to be able to use different abilities in this fight?
Mhm.
And instead, all she does is fly around and punch things. She can do so much more. I don't understand.
Yeah. Again, it kind of goes into just rushed, right? I mean, this whole moment could have been like a 30-minute episode. And we
Yeah.
could have seen things like that where you're getting more of like trying to, more actively trying to save all the people there versus fighting them using more
Hmm.
abilities. Yeah, I agree.
Well, surprise, the Morlocks aren't dead. Magneto's there. He's protecting them with his magnet bubble. That doesn't make any sense. I don't understand why he can control magnetism and somehow that means he can just block everything with a bubble of magnetism. Doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I
Whatever.
agree.
Um, so he's protecting them. The Tri-Sentinel, as it's so aptly called, basically like zeroes in on him and is like blasting away at his barrier. And there's like a moment of self-realization maybe that he has where he's just like, I'm not going to be able to stop this. So he sort of apologizes,
Hmm.
and then they get wiped out. He like lowers his bubble and they're evaporated. It's a big moment, and immediately followed by Rogue getting super mad, going like crazy and flying straight at the Sentinel. Gambit uses his bike to like knock her down to basically like stop her from sacrificing herself. He gets caught by the Sentinel as he's trying to attack it. He gets like stabbed through the back, and the Sentinel like holds him up in classic bad guy fashion. If you're a bad guy, if you're a supervillain out there, you don't taunt the hero. You're just giving them time to
Yeah.
get you. I'm not a supervillain, but I'm just saying it's like, man, cliche number one. So Big Sentinel holds him up. Gambit essentially like uses his power to supercharge the entire Sentinel and sacrifices himself, blows up the Sentinel. If he could have done that this whole time, all he had to do was touch it. Why didn't he just immediately go to its feet and touch its foot and blow it up? Why was he doing literally anything other than that?
Well, yeah, I don't know if it's just the fact of him touching it or if he had to more or less self-destruct himself while
Mhm.
while energizing it.
I mean, maybe it just seems like an oversight. Like, he's able to use his power to charge up this whole thing to blow it up, and yet when he fights Sentinels in earlier episodes, he's just throwing cards at them. It's like, but you could just touch them and blow them up. I don't know. Super powerful moment though.
Mm-hmm.
The Sentinel threat is gone. Rogue runs over to Gambit's like charred body and is basically just like she's touching him and she's like, I can't feel him. And
Mhm.
so in this episode, we lost all the Morlocks, who knows how many countless other mutants, Magneto and Gambit, all in the span of, watch time, maybe 5 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a lot.
Mhm.
It's huge. It's like, all right, we're what, 5 episodes into this series, so like a little over halfway.
Mm-hmm.
This is huge to happen this early in the season still. Um, I recognize that we have watched ahead. I'm sure listeners have probably watched ahead, but in the spirit of going episode by episode, what does this mean? Who's in charge now? Is Geonosia going to recover? Is Geonosia going to recover from this? I keep thinking
Yeah,
Geonosis from
probably
Star Wars.
right. Probably said that too.
Is
Genosha.
is are there greater implications for this? I mean, that one lady is there from the
Mhm.
UN when the attack happens. Like, do we know who's in charge of the Sentinels? We know that there's those crazy guys with Sentinel tech. We know that Trask is in prison, potentially doing Sentinel stuff. But, like, how did nobody see this giant, like, earth shattering Sentinel that can teleport? I mean, where did it come from? How did it
Yeah.
get there without anyone noticing? So,
Place like Genosha, even though yeah, everyone's supposed to be at this big event, you would think there would be guards
mhm.
monitoring.
Or any sort of threat
Yeah,
monitoring tech. I mean, they're
right.
they're mutants. Like some of them, their literal abilities are
To
technology.
yeah,
Like I don't understand
yeah.
how they don't have something that could have seen this coming.
Hmm.
But man, it was just like as it was happening, I couldn't believe what was happening. Like
Mhm.
it seemed like they introduced this threat. Sure, it was scary. Sure, it was big, but they were going to stop it. And maybe somebody got hurt or put in like critical care, but like no one was going to die. And then it's like one person after the other gets taken out. Wild. Who knows what's going to happen next? I hope that it, you know,
Yeah, with all the various little, episode cameos, especially with like, we start with the Watcher, like, is something could this be an upcoming episode and what if? It's
mhm.
like what if they knew this Tri-Sentinel was going to attack?
Right.
How
Yeah.
would it have changed everything? With Cable being a part of this season, does this, and especially like the fact that we're, in the Marvel as a whole, we're kind of in this whole like multiversal world right now.
Mhm.
Will Cable be able to bring back, Magneto and Gambit? You
Mhm.
know, are we leading to a path where Cable's trying to figure out how to stop all this from happening or find a way to bring back these people that have died at this event?
I mean, there's no way that one of them doesn't come back.
Sure.
Like it seems crazy to introduce a cast of 8 people and then
Hmm.
kill 2 of them in one
Too.
episode. So, I
Yeah.
mean, one of them is for sure coming back, but it's just
Yeah, is it
who
is it
and
a is it a moment? Yeah, I'm curious if we'll see moments where it's just like Magneto and Gambit having these kind of conversations.
Mhm.
Like if they had the opportunity to come back, but only one of them could,
Mm.
because it's all going to boil down to like Rogue
Oh
and
yeah. I mean, that's
is
like a classic
yeah.
conflict, right? Like who do you bring back? The guy that you
Yeah.
actually love or the guy that you
Right.
think you love?
Yeah.
So,
Or is it Rogue's decision, right? Like that's a tough one. If Rogue has the ability, like could only bring back one of them, like which one would she pick?
Well, we know who she ran to at the
Yeah.
end.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, I was reading a little bit about the showrunner talking about this episode, and he specifically talked about how with Gambit from the beginning of the season, he did everything he could to endear him to the audience. He said the half t-shirt was on purpose to make us love him
Hmm.
so that he could do this in episode 5. And
Wow.
boy, it was effective. I was trying to look back and see if like whenever I was a kid, if Gambit had really stood out to me, like whenever I watched the show. And like not much, like a little bit. I remember seeing Taylor Kitsch play him in the movies and being
Mhm.
like, okay, they cast a cute dude as this character, right? But yeah, he was probably my favorite character in this version of the show. Um, and so, yeah, and he said it's because he did that because not everybody gets to finish their story. Like he set up that Gambit was going to have this great big arc where he suddenly like becomes a hero, justifies himself, and he kind of does. He has that moment at the end, but he didn't get to tell it the way that we thought that he would. We thought that it would be him being the good guy, getting the girl. That's maybe how the season ends, and that's not how it played out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I
Or at
guess
least it hasn't yet.
there's still hope, right? Like
Yeah.
Yes.
Rogue can only bring one back. We've said it here on the show. Uh yeah, I mean overall I think that this episode was so good. Even the
Mhm.
like weird side stories that I don't care about, it's like they all mean something
Mhm.
and have, potential implications moving forward. I think I think I've talked about it before, but like comic book X-Men is a wild ride of like who's in charge of what and who's again not necessarily evil or good, but who's focused on the Magneto thinking versus focused on Charles Xavier thinking. Cyclops, this is the perfect segue for Cyclops to take on his role as like head of Genosha, more Magneto thinking leaning, especially knowing that the mother of his child is there and on this board of directors. So he could easily step into what was going to be Magneto's role.
Didn't Madeline die?
Did she?
I thought she got dead right after Cable showed up.
She did like, yeah, when the thing shoots its big beam.
Mhm.
I think she was like in the path of the beam, but I don't think that we saw her specifically.
Mm.
We didn't see
Yeah.
her death, and it seems like she's a big enough character that they would have shown it if she had died.
If she died, yeah.
So, I mean, potentially, but we'll see, I guess. And then, what's going on with Jean and Logan, I mean, is that what are the X-Men doing? So we'll find out next week, I guess. um, well, I remembered our question from last week, or
But
I guess 2
wait,
weeks ago. Wait, go ahead.
before we get into that, I want to call out the true MVP of this episode,
Ooh.
and that is the band Ace of Base. Because
Was
when
that
that
them in the song?
song came on, I was just like, no way.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
like, if this isn't an actual song from the 90s, they have done an
Yeah.
amazing ape of one.
Yeah. Uh Ace of Base, what Human Nature, I believe is the name of the song.
Mhm.
Yeah, added it back to my playlist. Yeah.
I mean, they've really, stuck to their guns about how this show is being made, and I think it's really
Mhm.
cool. So,
Yeah.
all right. Our question from last week was in the older X-Men games, who is your favorite character? Whether you've played them or not, you know, And we talked a little bit, a quick recap of last time we spoke about this. And, Wolverine, he's up there.
Yeah.
Wolverine, probably one of my favorite X-Men characters. Wolverine, probably not one of my favorite video game characters in the old games because he didn't have a healing factor. So he didn't do anything special. You had to be up close to people to hit them. Number one, Gambit. Gambit was my all-time favorite X-Men until the age of like 15. And then I switched to like, I like Wolverine. He's cool. But up until then, I was all about Gambit, even though he was like hardly in anything. Every time he was in something, it was like, is he good? Is he bad? What's he do? 100% Gambit all the way. Throwing cards, using his staff. He is the coolest.
Nice. Yeah, I remember playing the arcade game and trying to think of the arcade. It's like the Silver Ball game room in Texarkana. Pretty sure I always picked either Wolverine or Cyclops. I may have picked Storm from time to time. I remember liking the character of Storm, the weather abilities, but I remember like Cyclops shooting laser beams.
Oh, yeah. Storm was good
Yeah.
too. She could spin those little tornadoes.
She do the spin. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Elisa, you know, take a shot in the dark if you didn't play him.
I was about to say, and what I'm sure will shock you is I didn't really play a lot of video games at all, but I never ever played X-Men. Um, in fact, until you mentioned it, I didn't know it was a game. I probably could have assumed, but I didn't know that it was a game. Um, if I had been little me and I would have been picking though, I'm pretty sure I would have picked Jubilee. Because whenever I watched the show, since she was the young female character, that was always the one where I was like, yay, Jubilee. So I probably would have chosen her if she was playable. I have not seen this game. I do not know who is involved.
There was a Jubilee in one of them. I think there were easily like 20 different X-Men games that all came out before like the Nintendo 64. But the ones that I remember the most are the arcade game, like a side-scrolly beat 'em up game, and then the one that I had, which I think was just called like X-Men 2. It was on the Sega Genesis, and you could be like one of 5 characters. And I will be completely honest, I don't think I ever made it past the second level of that game to this day, and I've tried to play it again. I just can't. I couldn't do it. It's a difficult game. Well, for this week's question, I'm going to take it back to when we did our shoe episode. We didn't do a whole episode on shoes, but when we talked about the shoes from She-Hulk, and then we designed our own shoes. There are new X-Men 97 shoes out right now from a couple different shoemakers. So my question is, of these new shoes, if you had to get one or were gifted one, which one would you want? I know of 4 at least, so I will try to remember to at least send them to you two, but hopefully post them so everyone can see the 4 I'm talking about. But
Question, do they have Velcro straps? Because there's only one way to capture the 1997 spirit, and that is Velcro straps.
I think that the Gambit ones that I saw do have Velcro straps.
I don't think they do.
They don't? I know Nike.
Think they
I think
do.
it's Nike and Skechers. I think those are the 2 that I saw.
Reebok.
Reebok.
Reebok has 2 of them, but I don't know where the other ones. The other ones, I guess, are Nike. But yeah, the Wolverine and Gambit are Reebok.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm looking at them.
So we'll give our answers next week. Listeners, make sure you send your answers to us on social media. And if you design shoes and you want to design some X-Men shoes, send us those too. I mean, we'll put them in the running for sure. thank you all for listening, and join us next week as we continue this crazy adventure of X-Men 97. And who knows?
We're halfway through.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much more to happen. Who knows who else will die or be resurrected or go to a different timeline? Who knows? Join us next week. We'll see you all then.